Yo, welcome back everybody. Today we have the Hearthstone Battlegrounds patch 21.2 patch review. A big day. Now if you guys were around on the day before this patch is launching, yesterday to me now, on the Twitch stream, you know that we did an exhaustive patch review. And I mean exhaustive. We spent close to 10 hours on this patch. 4 hours through the initial run through, 3 hours on a secondary one, then spent time co-op talking about it with other people, specifically Pocky Play, Sapphire, and Mr. Incredible. We're all top like 50 players that are very, very good at the game, and we had a lot to talk about. Well, it was requested that I do a consolidated version of the run through of the patch notes. There's a lot to unpack in this patch. That being said, we can consolidate it down to, let's hope for like 30 minutes. All right, let's get started. So, before we get started into what are added to the game, because this is a huge minion overhaul, we're going to focus on what were the removed minions. What was removed from the game to make space, make that design space to add 37 new minions to the game. These are broken up pretty heavily between each tier. Tier 1 lost what you could view as most of the fodder minions, the things that you never really took that had some level of small situational usage. Or were units like, say for example, the demons here. Let's make this font a little bit bigger for the review. The demons here that were capable of being used in, say, demon comps, like Wrathweaver comps, but have now been replaced by even better versions. Tavern 2, on the other hand, that Tavern tier that we never really go to in this meta, or the past meta. If you're playing at a competitive level, you've probably spent less time on Tavern 2 than ever before. With the introduction or the heavy usage of Warrior Curve, Chinese Curve, Rafam Curve, Jeef Curve, blah blah blah, there's a ton of names for these things. We're staying on 1 for longer than ever, and most of the time powering from Tavern 1 straight to Tavern 3 or 4. Why? Because getting a hold of triples and getting a hold of consistent 1-stars, especially token units for a lot of heroes, is more important than taking situational mid-game power that exists in 2-stars. And considering that most competitive players are bypassing Tavern 2, you aren't even weak on those turns. If you're that lone person at 10k plus that's playing Tavern 2 then going to Tavern 3 in a game, you probably noticed your win rate dropped a ton. It's because everybody else has adapted around it, and we have gotten to a point that we don't even play Tavern 2 anymore. Well, Tavern 2's gone, and then they removed the garbage from Tavern 2 as well. Okay, cool. They add new situational things in there. Does it restore the need to go to Tavern 2? Probably not. We're not really at that point yet. There's not enough quality on Tavern 2. We're probably going to still end up in a meta that's mostly dominated by early game being Tavern 1 and Tavern 3 units. And there's a couple busted Tavern 3s that are being added that are going to really screw with that. Tavern 3 minions, Tavern 4 minions, Tavern 5, Tavern 6. I'm not going to go through all of these together, but there's a general theme amongst these units. They basically removed early blowout units. And what do I mean by that? I mean, if you triple into a 4 on an early turn, say turn 5 or turn 6, and you take a Hex Ruin, you take a Herald of Flame, you take a Harbinger, you take a Security Rover, you're winning that next round, and you're not winning it by a small margin. That Herald of Flame wiping out your entire board and dealing 15 damage to you on turn 5 feels pretty bad. That Harbinger, when they have double Acolyte, that suddenly does 20 damage to you on turn, say, 6, that one feels pretty bad. It's opening up design space so they can allow for a variety of tier 4 minions to be added that don't do that specific thing very well, but rather give you some level of direction. And a lot of 4-stars that were added are pretty interesting complex units. So honestly, it's a welcome change. With 5, it's kind of the same thing. The Sneeds, the Peggle, the Goliath, the Direhorn, the Mithrax, the Mal'Ganis, they're the tempo things, right? They're not scaling, aside from Mithrax. They're all just the tempo units, and that's what they got rid of. Tide Razor, Gar, blowout potential, right? Responsible for those 20 damage swings on, say, turn 7 or turn 8. Gar getting a little bit big too fast really ends up in a position that, we'll just say, it can cause some of those 35 plus damage swings in the mid-game. Getting rid of blowout potential is not bad for the game. In combination with that, let's scroll back up to the top. A couple new rules have been added to Battlegrounds. One of them is that we have a damage cap of 15 damage prior to the first person dying. That's also going to slow down the mid game, where if somebody gets way ahead, say for example an elemental board that does 1 billion damage to you, if you're 16 health or higher, you're not capable of dying on that turn. Now, it doesn't stop you from dying over 2 turns. It doesn't stop people from high rolling, doing 15 damage every turn until someone dies and then killing everybody else. Doesn't fix the Shudderwalk problem. But it is a nice little safety net to prevent somebody from getting spiked from 25 plus on, say, turn 6 or turn 7, which has happened quite a few times. It can get ridiculous sometimes. But we have a safety net now. All right, now let's get into what is added to the game. Specifically, a lot of the new heroes center around the new keyword that they've added, avenge. Avenge does something after X units die. So avenge 2 will do the effect of the unit, whatever said after avenge on their card text, when the second unit dies, and repeats for every X units after. So say avenge 2 once again. The avenge proc will occur when the second unit dies on the board, second friendly unit, the 4th friendly unit, the 6th friendly unit, the 8th friendly unit, so on and so forth. So for example, if we take a look at, like, say this avenge 1 bird buddy, whenever any unit dies on the board that is friendly, so your units, give all of your beasts +1/+1. It's like a spawn for only beasts every time something dies. Not just this thing dies, for that matter, not when this thing dies. When anything else on the board, say for example a rat dies, then all of your other beasts get 1/1. That kind of synergy, basically as your things die, you get an effect. Bouncing back real quick, we also have 2 new heroes that are added, and they change the rules a little bit, where Battlegrounds perks makes it more likely to get those heroes. And those new heroes can only be offered one at a time to people. No player will be offered more than 1 new hero at a time. It's a nice change. Makes it so that people can try the new stuff with more consistency. All right, 2 new heroes. Number 1, Master Win, who is effectively we'll call it the theory crafted hero that's been all over Reddit and YouTube and Twitch and everything for quite some time. What would happen if we merged 2 hero powers? What would happen if we had to discover a new hero power every turn? They kind of took that idea and ran with it. This is going to offer you 2 hero powers. You get to choose one of the 2 for a turn, and at the beginning of the next turn, you get offered 2 new hero powers again. You don't merge them together. We don't have that mechanic yet. We'll see if that one comes in an upcoming hero. But you get to pick a new hero power each turn. It has been confirmed that a lot of the hero powers that do not make sense for this hero will not be offered. So you can expect that Eudora is not going to be given to you. Turns out digging once isn't really that good of a hero power when you can't dig 5 times. So on and so forth. There are plenty of those heroes that they don't really make sense. So Master Win has we'll call it a different hero pool that it can select from. A limited pool. Things that are actually useful hero powers. I mean, we'll theory craft here. This hero, as fun as it sounds, there are a lot of misses on hero powers. Sure, you can take tempo things. Sure, you can get Reno. Sure, you can get some things that are big power spikes. But you don't plan for them, and you don't heavily play into them. There are a lot of, like, use the Deathwing example. Deathwing is only a really good hero power at high MMR because you can tailor your board to take better advantage of your hero power than other people do. If you don't know you're having Deathwing hero power for the upcoming round, how good is your board for Deathwing versus your opponent's board for Deathwing? You don't really know it's coming, so it's just a kind of a coin flip if that hero power is even good for you. Now, obviously, you choose whether you take that or the other thing, but there are tons and tons of those examples. Can you make good use of Alakir's hero power? Do you have a poison minion or a big attack minion in the front? Or are you like a little token demon or taunt comp? Something like that really won't be able to make use of Alakir hero power. Maybe you're a mech comp and you don't really have a divine shield, non-divine shield unit you can lead with. You know, there's plenty of those examples where you think, oh my god, what if I just get Reno every turn? At the same time, you can just be offered garbage every turn. And the average is what matters, right? And the average for this is going to be a little bit more lackluster than I see we'll call it the temperature of people's comments. People always sensationalize things. I imagine this is a tier 3 hero. It's not going to be something that's super exciting. Cariel Rome. Basically, a complicated hero again. You know how we added Kurtrus, and Kurtrus had like an upgradable hero power? Well, now we have another one, Cariel Rome. This hero power is, I'm going to call it lackluster. Honestly, I don't believe this hero even makes it out of tier 4. It's basically guff on a less conventional way of buffing things with like having the tavern up. But generally speaking, it is a interesting idea. Basically AoE buffs. People think Tyrion or whatever, but remember, Tyrion could just stay on Tavern 1 and buy things You have to level to even get to a place where this is a decent hero power. This is going to need a little bit of a buff before this really sees play. You can go through all the ranks, but basically you're buffing 1, 3, or 5 targets depending on your tavern tier with 1/1 buffs. All right, let's get into minions. These are broken up by tribe. So every tribe got between 1 and 6 new minions added to it. I'm going to go quickly through some of these situational units because, well, most of the low tier units, if they don't have major effects that affect the mid game, are going to be used for mostly stats and effect here and there. There are a lot of units, and I'm not going to spend 3 hours on this review. This is a consolidated video, so if you want the extended thoughts and whatever, the extended patch notes that we did yesterday is linked below the stream. You're welcome to, go peruse every last thought that we had over 10 hours of going through those videos. These will be quicker. Leapfrogger, here a beast minion on Tavern 2. This is effectively replacing the combination of what Kindly Grandmother and the pack leader were removed from Tavern 2. Leapfrogger, Sewer Rat, and then on tier 3, Bird Buddy are giving you a different beast package. Leapfrogger, when it dies, gives a buff to your other beasts. That buff then gets this death rattle as well, so when that thing dies, you get another buff to your other beasts, so on and so forth. It's a lot of stats in the mid game. Problem is, we don't care about stats in the mid game. Like I said before, we don't really stay on Tavern 2 in this meta. Most of the time, taking something that wins rounds 4, 5, 6 is pretty pointless. It saves you a little bit of health and it puts you behind playing for pairs and it puts you behind from power leveling. So tempo is just that. It's just tempo on those turns. And if people turn the corner on turn 7, 8, 9, 10, it doesn't matter if you're at 35 health or you're at 5 health. If you're weak on those turns, you're going to die from that range. We'll see how that goes. But mid-game tempo pieces like this generally don't have much play in the current meta. Same deal with Sewer Rat, which is an interesting one though. This unit is a 3/2 body that death rattles a 2/3 taunt, both being beasts. So you can see how this would very easily fit Mama Bear builds, especially while you're transitioning into it. If you can play this after Mama Bear, you make a decent sized beast that death rattles a beast that gets buffed with taunt, which then protects Mama Bear. Big deal. So it's a decent mid-game minion. We're going to be happy to keep this in the pool if you're a beast player. Bird Buddy, we talked about before, with the Avenge 1, every time a beast dies, or every time anything dies. This isn't tribal-centric. Anytime anything dies, give a beast +1/1. Nice unit for the mid-game. Going to give you a lot of stats if you have a bunch of beasts on the board. Even 3 or 4 beasts gives you a pretty good string of buffs there. Makes your attack order a little bit awkward because you have to suicide things that aren't beast first to maximize this buff. But still, a 2/4 body that gives a bunch of 1/1s is pretty damn good from a 3-star. All right, now the key ones. There are 2 big beasts that are added. Reanimating Rattler. Tier 4 beasts give a friendly beast reborn. What you might be thinking immediately is, hey, that makes everybody Lich King. Yes, it does. That means you can taunt up your Goldrin. You can play Goldrin comp with a taunted Goldrin now, because you can just reborn the Goldrin. Then you can play Macaws and Goldrin, not have a temporary taunt on the board. Really cool. The headroom for Goldrin comp has gone up. You can reborn your Mama Bear, make that more consistent for the tempo mid-game boards. Combine that with the new 5-star beast, which is the Pale Scale Crocolisk, Avenge 2, and Death Rattle. So this effect occurs every time 2 minions die on the board, and when this minion dies on the board. Give another friendly beast +6/6. This is an incredibly strong card. Think of it like this. Even if this thing dies 3rd out of units on the board, it's going to give a 6/6 to another beast from the Avenge 2. It's going to give a 6/6 from the beast from its own Death Rattle. And a 4/5 body. Think about your average 5-star and say, is a 16/17 a good 5-star? Hell yeah, it is. That's a ton of stats. Combine that with Mama Bear, and you're in business for mid-game power for beasts. This is a huge tempo spike. Very, very good card. Combined, they make the headroom for beast quite a bit higher. Mama Bear is going to get more stats. It's going to be more consistent. Goldrin comp doesn't have to play temporary bad minions and can play for a more complete comp with more Macaws or Hydras or whatever. And you can taunt up your Goldrin to enable that. Both of them combined make the beast comp. It doesn't really change what are the final comps. It just makes them have a higher ceiling, which is good because beasts are a very good tempo build in the game at the moment, and making them a little bit better toward the late game is a nice change. All right, not a huge change with beasts. Demons. Demons are probably the tribe that got changed the most. The 1-star, I'm not going to go too much on this Trickster. This is basically a new version of Fiendish Servant, where Fiendish Servant used the Death Rattle to give attack. This one gives health. It's maximum health added to another target. 2/2 stat line's pretty hard to use. It's going to be something you pass over most of the time on Tavern 1. Do note that it is a Death Rattle Murloc, or Death Rattle Demon, which means Demon Sauralisk builds, Wrathweaver plus Sauralisk, scale for both the Wrathweaver and the Sauralisk from this imp, and the Icky Imp, the other 1-star. So instead of Homunculus, you now have 2 Death Rattle imps, which means Demon Sauralisk is more consistent now, because there's more Death Rattles and Demons combined total in the pool. Icky Imp, on the other hand, is probably going to be a staple of this patch. 1/1 Death Rattle summon 2 1/1s, and the early turns is 3 1/1 bodies, guaranteed on the board. And more importantly, it leaves more bodies to proc Avenge. Where if you view this little thing, say for example the only Avenge unit we've looked so far, if we have this thing and say 2 beasts behind an Icky Imp and things die in the correct order, then you get 3 deaths off of the Icky Imp that both buff the board every beast 1/1 each. So if say 2 beasts were on the board, that's a 6/6 buff from Bird Buddy just because you had this as a 1-star up front. Now, obviously attack order matters, etc., etc. But you can see why this compounds with Avenge very quickly. And now we start getting to the disgusting things. If you do not think this card is oppressively strong, and I don't mean like, oh, it's kind of good. This thing is so broken that this is going to severely warp the mid game. Why? Why is Impatient Doomsayer so broken? A 2/6 body with Avenge 3 add a demon to your hand. You might be thinking, oh, it doesn't do anything in combat. It doesn't give you a demon. It doesn't Death Rattle. It's just a 2/6. 2/6, first of all, is a good stat line for a 3-star. Second of all, you're adding economy to your hero. Warden of Old, which is removed from the game, used to be arguably the best 3-star in the game, according to a lot of competitive players. At least like a top 5 3-star. A lot would say the best. Now, not only are you generating an economy in the form of a coin, what was the Warden of Old, you're now getting a full demon, which can occupy a board spot when you don't have a full board, which can synergize with anything else you have, say Wrathweaver or any upcoming demon synergy, or, God forbid, a 1 out of 5-ish chance that you get a Devourer, which is now 3 gold and a 3/3 additive stat line to your board. The 3-star demon. There's only 5 demons below this point. This card is nuts. It's going to be like, you put this on the board, you play to have a bunch of Death Rattles, you start buying up pairs of demons, and you will reliably be taking 6 stars by turn 7, and on top of that, winning every round. This card is actually insane. Like, I'm not sure why they printed it in this form. Let's just say this. I fully appreciate that it is super hard to balance this game. But this needs to be Avenge 4 before it was introduced at the very least. Drop these stats. If this was a 1/3 and had Avenge 4 as a stat line, I still think it'd be the strongest card in the set. The fact that it's a 2/6 and Avenge 3, it's nuts. This is nuts. You're going to get, on average, like 2 procs out of this. Just buy up Death Rattles. Buy up Acolyte from Tavern 1. When you have those kind of cards, you consistently get this thing to die after at least 3 things die. Acolyte dies twice, and whatever you put in position 1 dies, right? So you just guarantee get 3, and there's no chance the Doomsayer dies before that. God forbid you get another 3 and get another demon added to your hand. Think of it like this. It's like Genie on Tavern 3. Obviously, you get less value than like, oh my god, the Gar blowouts or whatever. This is nuts. This is insanely strong. Like, this is insanely strong. All right, moving on. Don't need to dwell forever. Mal'Ganis was removed from Tavern 5, and they added a new version of Mal'Ganis to Tavern 4. Makes it quicker to find the immunity effect to enable your Wrathweaver to not damage you. Makes sure other demons have attack, which is kind of nice, especially with, say, for example, Icky Imp, which has a lot of bodies. Getting 3 attack is pretty cool. Honestly, it's a good effect to have in the game, so moving it down a Tavern tier makes it more accessible. Cool. Not bad. Now the 2 big ones for demons. I mean, outside of this thing busting the entire game open. The thing is, this isn't a demon card. This is Avenge 3. It doesn't mean you have to kill off 3 demons. This could be anything in the game. This fits every composition. Every comp is going to want this card in the mid game. You don't have a comp in the mid game, right? All right, dwelling for longer. Insatiable or Zool. Taunt, after you play a demon, consume a minion from Bob's Tavern to gain its stats. Seems pretty simple, right? So in other words, you play a demon, a random minion gets consumed from Bob's Tavern, and you add that to your 4/6 stat line. Think of it like a convoluted floating watcher. You're going to want to cycle demons because you already have Wrathweaver on the board in a lot of demon senses or demon games. And then you just, depending on your tavern tier, your average value that you gain as a buff to this will go up as you level up. Pretty cool. Nice effect. Interesting. Has some weird synergies with, say, for example, Daryl to be able to clean up the board and do reliable dances and get hats on every single hat on one unit. It allows you to dance on Tavern 6 as Daryl, which is something that's not something that we've had before. And for that matter, it has some like potential just to consume big minions on high Tavern tiers to get a lot of stats. And when you combine that with now the 6-star Famished Fellbat, which is effectively an AoE enabling Urzul, where every one of your demons now consumes a minion from the tavern to get the stats. When you get these things early, you're just going to want power level. If you can just buy a little bit of time and get this many stats, don't underestimate how strong these cards are. We might have written off demons for a long time, but this is a lot of scaling. And if the game gets quick, which is kind of what it looks like, these guys are going to give you a lot of stats very quickly, and games will close out in the time period that they're still relevant. That being said, what counters big stats? Divine Shields, Poison, Utility, right? Basically, things that enable multiple hits from their units. And mechs are getting pretty good buffs too. So there's going to be a stabilization or an equalization of the meta based upon builds like this being consistent and getting strong, and mechs being so accessible. So we'll see as it shakes out. All right. Mechs, the tribe that is probably going to be king of this meta. Pupbot, tier 1, mech, Divine Shield. Somebody's gone crazy at Blizzard. I thought there's no world that they ever put back a Divine Shield on Tavern 1 or 2. They saw what it did to Daryl and how consistent Daryl was before. Also, just so people know, if you know the stats, at top 1%, Daryl is the top average performing hero in this game right now. And that's prior to giving Daryl a tier 1 mech to dance on. A tier 1 Divine Shield, I should say. And it's tribal now. Remember the olden days, Daryl? They used to stay on 1 for at least like 3 turns. Line up at least a Divine Shield. Say, for example, the Righteous Protector that exists on Tavern 1. Gather up Selfless Heroes and shit. And just dance on 1, then go to 3 and play the game from there. Yeah, Daryl was a top tier hero for a long time for a lot of good reasons. But one of them was that the early access to Divine Shields made him a house. Now you have even more value out of hats with the 3/3 buff instead of 2/2. And early access to Divine Shields. That's nuts. Cthulhu now has access to a Divine Shield on Tavern 1. Who else? Mutinous, who loves to be able to consume minions and reliably put stats on Divine Shields. Sure, this is a low stat line, but if you can guarantee that the minion that you buy first each turn is just consumed, then you put another thing on the board, you're going to be buffing up a Divine Shield in the mid game very consistently. This is going to be a cornerstone of this meta. A very, very strong card. Tea break real quick. All right. Mechanotank. This is basically a 4-star version of Arcane Cannon. A little weaker. Don't worry, you're not getting this on turn 3 and winning every round afterwards. Avenge 2 deals 6 damage to the highest health enemy minion. If this said random minion, this would be a much stronger card. The fact that it does 6 damage to the highest health minion is only really good in the mid game. It's good at the time period that hitting 6 damage on a 6 or 8 or whatever health minion is a good effect. The problem is once things start getting bigger, doing 6 damage to a thing with 40 health when most of your minions are like 40 damage is a negligible effect. It needs to be able to ping off Divine Shields and shit to be relevant late game. That being said, it's a very, very good tempo unit in the mid game. It can fit any composition. You don't have to be mechs to play this. Avenge 2 doesn't mean 2 mechs die. Any minion dies, you do 6 damage. Get this to proc once and it's a good 4-star. Get it to proc twice and it's a very, very, very good 4-star, right? Dealing upwards of 18 damage from a unit on tier 4. You can see where this fits any game in the mid game. Because you have minions that are going to die. If minions aren't going to die, then you don't have a problem winning the round, right? And once your minions are dying, then you're getting extra effect off of this unit. And 6-3 isn't the end of the world for a stat line. All right. Grease Spot. This is arguably one of the top 3 most broken units in the game, or in this patch. After a friendly minion loses Divine Shield, give it +2/+1 permanently, aka another Arm of the Empire type scaling unit. Yeah, it can only proc once or twice per game, depending on how many Divine Shields a unit can have. Bristleback Knight, Deflectobot, they can get extra shields, right? But this just passively fits mech boards. You can taunt this up and give it death rattles, and it's a permanent minion on a Deflecto board. You can just kind of casually put this on a board for, I don't know, maybe George? George. Let's think about George for a minute here, guys. George is going to be nuts in this patch, by the way. And then casually scale every one of your units +2/1 per turn. It's like a Light Fang on Tavern 4 for George. There's even more that makes this work. But this thing is like an incredibly flexible scaling unit. Definitely better than Iron Sensei was before. Yeah, sure, it's on Tavern 4, so it's a little bit harder to get. This thing is a huge buff to mechs. Holy Mackerel. If you remember Holy Mackerel back in the day, we memed for about a year after it was removed to add a mech version of the card. There's a mech version of the card. This is going to be incredibly strong. It can't get poison, which is a big deal. You're going to have to find a way to attack scale it, but we do have ways to attack scale in this meta. Grease Spot, Arm of the Empire, etc., etc. You expect to see this thing make the cut for like final board states for, say, Deflectobot Arm Comp, where you taunt up like both of your Deflectos and some other mechs. This thing is another way to reliably get a couple more hits, which is a really strong card. I don't think this is as oppressive as people are making it out to be. And again, I don't think Holy Mackerel was as oppressive as we remember that card with our rose-colored goggles over here that were like, oh my god, it was the worst thing in the world. It was very, very strong. But there were ways to counter Holy Mackerel. There were ways to counter double Holy Mackerel. People just didn't really understand the game that well back then. Now we've gotten better at it. That being said, this card is undeniably strong. This is a very, very, very good card. This doesn't ruin the game or anything. This is a very good card. It is too strong on Tavern 5, probably. But to be fair, there are a lot of broken things in this patch. So this is just one of them. This could easily get moved to Tavern 6. The other thing to consider is that you never really go to Tavern 5 as a mech board. If you're a Deflecto board, you're going to triple into this and be happy with it, but you're not going to go to 5 to search for it. So the high roll is like, you may get it if you triple, and you don't triple that many things as mechs. So it's a hard one to see this being that oppressive. It is good. You will love this card if you have it, but you don't get like access to this every single time you're playing mechs. Omega Buster has that same problem. This is a very, very strong card, but it's on Tavern 6 and it has to fit mech boards. And if you're a Deflecto comp, there is no world you're tripling into this. You're not going to 5. You're not tripling in the 6s. Maybe it's like the final minion in the game where you're like, okay, I got a triple on the last turn, level and take a 6-star. I can play a Mithrax. I can play an Omega Buster, or maybe even like a Gas Coiler or something to fit the final board spot on your board. Sure, maybe. There's a chance. But you're not going to waste that gold to level to 5 to take a shot for one specific unit. On the other hand, what if you play in the mid game and you take a shot for a 6-star and you get a hold of this? You can pivot from this into mechs. You just don't go from like Deflecto into this, right? So Omega Buster, summon 6 1/1 microbots for everyone that doesn't fit, give mechs a 1/1. Assuming that Death Rattle text reads sequentially, it's going to put the microbot Death Rattle on the board, and then it's going to buff your board between 1/1 or 0/0 and 5/5, because there's always one spot open, right? Because of the microbots. I guess that's not entirely true. If it gets cleaved to the right of something that drops Death Rattles, it could give a 6/6 buff. It's possible. But in most circumstances, you're going to want to suicide this thing off. People have done a lot of theory crafting on things like Macaw builds with this, etc., etc. Seems okay. I think it's, at the very least, a nice piece that fits a tempo mech board. If you get this thing in the mid game, it's probably one of the top 2 highest tempo units in the game, this and Eliza. And if you have this, you just kind of steer into going full murder board, you know, full tempo, and try to kill everybody you see. It may not get you first place, but it gives you a ton of tempo in the meantime. All right, got to speed up a little bit here, considering that we're almost at 30 minutes and we're only a few tribes through. I want to make this review like 45 minutes at max. Murlocs. Murlocs got gutted, guys. Murlocs were already really, really bad at competitive MMR. Like if you play in the 10k plus range, you know that you never see Murloc boards. The only hero that even remotely makes Murlocs work is Jandis. Maybe Murlocs in a Murloc player in 5% of your lobbies. Now they're even worse. I don't love it, honestly. I would like to see the tribe redesigned with some complexity other than like get Bran and AoE buff. This is probably my biggest disappointment with the patch. I wish Murlocs were stronger. That being said, let's go see what happens with them. Very, very basic overview here. We get a party elemental-esque Murloc. Whenever you play a Murloc, give 2 Murlocs 1 health. You get Swolfen, which is a battle cry to buff itself as a Murloc instead of AoE buff. You get the good one, SI7 over here. First of all, great card art and funny name for the SI7 agent. Pretty cool. Which has an avenge mechanic for 3 kills, or every 3 kills, give a friendly Murloc poisonous permanently. We assume that poisonous can also target units that have poisonous, so it makes it unreliable to use this to poison your whole board. Toxfin has been removed for Murlocs, so you don't have an accessible way to get a hold of poison now. But it can poison itself. So this minion fits on menagerie boards pretty quickly, right? You don't have to open up a board space to get a Toxfin to buff up a poison or a Murloc to poison. But you don't have a reliable way now of buffing an Amalgadon. And also, let's think about this for a second. When do you buy Toxfin? When do you use Toxfin if you're in a menagerie game? Usually when you see an opponent that has things that you're like, I need poison in this round. This thing doesn't immediately have poison. So if it doesn't immediately have poison, you have to put this back in like position 3, 4, 5, somewhere in that range, and then it gets to poison something. This doesn't get to kill their big taunt. This doesn't react immediately to be able to counter a Rana or something like that. This is a slow minion you have to play in the mid game and preemptively know that you need poison for later. It doesn't make it bad. It's just not as flexible as it was before. Toxfin was a lot more flexible. All right, last but not least, we have a 6-star minion tailored to Murlocs, but in reality, this unit isn't really tailored to Murlocs. Battlecry, make a Murloc golden. You might see the immediate effect and be like, oh, you can make a golden Sephin. That's cool. Now we get more poisons quickly. Yes, agreed. That is a way to use it. Alternatively, you just target a Murloc that's in Bob's Tavern, buy up that Murloc, and get a different 6-star. It's probably the way this unit's going to be used more than its actual like buff a Murloc on your board and make it golden. In other words, when you're on Tavern 6 and you see Seafood Slinger, for 4 gold you can take a Discover a 6-star. Just buy up Seafood Slinger, play it, buff up a Murloc in the tavern, sell off the Seafood Slinger, buy the Murloc, sell the Murloc. For 4 net gold, you get a Discover a 6-star. That's a good use for it. We'll see. Plus he has a glorious beard, so props. Overall though, Murlocs took a pretty good hit here. Dragons. Dragons and all of the tribes that are after this point didn't really get overhauls. They're basically all of the expansion tribes, everything that was added after the base game. And they are arguably tribes that are in a better place right now. Most of them kept their theme, their flavor that they had. Pirates changed a little bit. But their end-game compositions are going to look very similar to what they were before. Evolving Chroma Wing is a 1-star that has situational uses. When you upgrade your Tavern tier, it doubles the attack. So if you can get early attack on this thing, then it gets really scary as it levels up. On top of that, if you have the ability to give it Divine Shield like George, or swap stats off like Vol'jin, or give it stats with like Mutinous or something like that, it can be a semi-permanent minion and or like swap its stats to a unit that is relevant, right? So this thing does have uses. As a 1-3 stat line on 1 and a 2-3 once you go to 2, it's pretty weak in terms of tempo. So you have to have a real use for it in the mid game. It's not a token unit. It doesn't give you gold. Even a 4-3 isn't worth buying up on Tavern 1 if you're not going to keep it till like later game or make use of the stats. It's meh. Has some uses though. It's kind of interesting. Whelp Smuggler. This one we could talk for a while on, but I will say this. This unit is a lot better than Wagtoggle was before. After a friendly dragon, it gains attack, give it 2 health. And what that means, if you work within the scope of what Battlegrounds works mechanically, is any minion buffed in the Tavern phase to get attack keeps permanent health. Any minion that gets buffed in the combat phase with get its attack in combat phase, say for example like a Spawn in N'Zoth, gets temporary health for that combat. So that makes Spawn buff this thing more, or buff every dragon more on the board during combat. But if, say, for example, you have this on a Calicos board, instead of Calicos buffing everything 1-1, it buffs everything 1-3 permanently. So both of those mechanics work really well. This thing pairs with Major Domo for buffs, because every single Domo buff gives a 1-1 instance, which means if you played 5 elementals, you get 6 1-1 instances added to, say, for example, a Bronze Warden in position 1. Bronze Warden in position 1, instead of getting a 6-6, would get a 6-18. That's a pretty good buff in the mid-game. We can see where this thing has a place. It actually has some usage as compared to like Wagtoggle before, or Togwoggle, I should say, which was just not really a useful card. All right, Tarek Gosa. Cool card, interesting card. This permanently keeps enchantments from combat. It has a good base stat line of 4/4 on Tavern 3. Has a lot of situational uses. A lot of hero powers or permanent stats. For example, the attack from Illidan or the Divine Shield, Wind Fury, and Taunt from Alakir would be permanently added to this unit because it's added in combat, right? So those kind of things make this unit effectively scale or get an incremental buff for one turn that you can then use your hero power on a different unit going forward, and so this retains its hero power value, which is kind of cool. A lot of interesting uses here. Combat buffs are pretty prevalent, so getting 1 or 2 of those and that kind of scaling makes this a pretty interesting unit. It's interesting. I'm not convinced it's really that good. It's just interesting. Now, we immediately added a combat buff into the game. Start of combat, give adjacent units 1/1 for each friendly dragon. So in other words, Prize Promo Drake plus Tarek Gosa alone on the board would give a 2/2 buff to adjacent dragons, or adjacent minions for each dragon. Now, if those are the only 2 dragons on the board, so this thing would scale 2/2 a turn. And since this thing is only in combat for a buff, Tarek Gosa would get temporary stats, but retain those temporary stats after the combat ends, and you would keep those permanently. Anything else buffed by Drake would just have those stats temporarily in the fight, and they would drop off at the end of the fight. Last but not least, we have a combo piece, Prester's Pyrospawn. This unit, first of all, notice has a 3/5 stat line for a 4-star, which is absurdly weak. But whenever a friendly dragon attacks, deal 3 damage to its target. This will be an incredibly strong piece in Calicos boards. Once you get to a stable position, subbing this thing onto your board, because it can scale with Calicos, gives you the ability for every one of your dragons to attack and ping off Divine Shield effects up front. So in other words, a dragon attacks, Calicos hits, 40/40 Calicos is hitting into a Divine Shield taunt. This thing attacks 3 damage into the Divine Shield taunt first, procs off its Divine Shield, then Calicos slams through and kills the minion. Combine that with Nadina, and you basically counter Divine Shield boards. Also, mechs are going to be very prevalent this patch. Killing Deflectos outright from the first attack hit into them is a very, very good tool. This thing will be very good in combo pieces, but it's pretty weak by itself. So, we'll see. Pirates. Pirates got a lot of interesting tools here, but the overall feeling of the tribe is going to remain about the same. Eliza's still in the game, Boat is gone, Hogger's still in the game. So the APM Pirate and the Exodia Pirate lines are still in the game. They're probably what you're going to see toward late game. The way you get to those places, though, is changing a little bit. Defiant Shipwright is just a 3/4 body, not Pirate Tribe, that gives you easy, accessible access to pirates over the course of the game. Every time you level up a Tavern tier, you get access to more pirates. It seems okay on something like Patches, but overall, I really don't see a place for this. It's just a good stat line, and like I said before, we don't really play on Tavern 2 for very long in this meta. Maybe 1 turn. There's a dog barking next place, so I apologize for that. Briny Bootlegger, very, very strong 3-star card. 4/4 body. At the end of your turn, if you have another pirate, add a coin. It's basically Warden of Old from previous patch, which we argue is one of the best cards in the game, but doesn't have to die, so you reliably get that coin so long as you have another pirate on the board. It also has a 1/1 buff over Warden of Old. It's a 4/4 body. It's a pretty good minion to have. Get this in a Salty Loot or whatever, and then you get economy unit value and scaling off of playing pirates. You can see why this starts to get out of hand. Get another one, you get another gold. Get enough economy, you can get ahead and then play APM Pirates or whatever. It's a really, really good piece to have. Peggy Brittlebone. Honestly, Peggy Brittlebone is my vote for the best design card in this patch. After a card is added to your hand, give another pirate 1/1. This is a combo piece, and a combo piece that doesn't rely upon you going full pirates. Play, for example, 2 Peggies on the board. Play, for example, Peggy plus Amalgadon on the board. Every time you add a card to your hand, that is, you buy a card, you generate a blood gem, you use your hero power as Mukla, you win a bet as Barov, you do whatever that gives you a coin to your hand, like say, for example, the combat effect here at the end of your turn. Briny Bootlegger gives you a coin. Then Peggy buffs something on the board. This is synergy with other classes. This is synergy with specific tribes. This is synergy with specific heroes. This card gets better or worse depending on what hero you're playing, what other tribes you have on the board. Situational, not busted, scaling for a pirate. And a pirate getting buffed is not the greatest thing in the world. So it's not like you're putting this on a Divine Shield and everybody's going to buy Peggy every time they see it. And they're like, oh my god, yeah. Shit, I can make a Divine Shield minion that's scaling at 1/1 per card I buy? Yeah, I'm going to do that. There's no Divine Shields on pirates. This isn't a busted effect because it's on pirates. If this was on mechs, this is a busted effect. Now that being said, George can make a minion Divine Shield, Alec here can make that minion in position 1, etc., etc. There are a lot of nuance instances where this is better or worse in the game. And it's an interesting card. It's an interesting effect with blood gems in or out, depending on bans, where coins are easily accessible or not, what your hero power is, etc., etc. Tony Two Tusk. Tier 5 pirate, make another friendly pirate golden permanently after avenge 5. That means 5 minions have to die on the board before this thing dies and your target pirate dies. That is a tough ask. That being said, this is a pretty interesting transition piece. If you're trying to play, say, for example, APM pirates and you get a hold of a Hogger and you see a Tony Two Tusk added on your board, you buy up that Two Tusk. Just get yourself a couple death rattles, like Acolytes, for example, and you quickly get to 5 kills. Hide the Two Tusk and the Hogger behind everything. Suddenly you have a golden Hogger. Same deal with Eliza, but Eliza's a little bit sketchier because you need to suicide things, right, to get the Eliza buff. Maybe you have a full board worth of pirates / divine shields or taunts or whatever, and Eliza's accessible. Being able to gold something reliably is pretty cool. The Avenge 5 is just a hard thing to do to get there. We'll see how this plays out. I think it's a little bit too situational to be like universally good, but there are going to be times where this is a very good pickup. Good. That's a good design, a well-designed card. If something is situationally good, that's a well-designed card. Nosy Looter, the new 6-star pirate. This replaced Boat, after all. No Boat. Sad. No more Yep Boats, guys. Now we have Nosy Looter. Every 2 turns, add a golden minion to your hand. A lot of people will see this and be like, holy shit, you get another 6-star every 2 turns. You're right, you do. But you have to be able to survive to that. And a 6-star that's a 7/6 is pretty weak. On top of that, getting this by, say, turn 8, which is like a normal turn to get a 6-star, means that you don't get any value out of your 6-star till turn 10. That is a big ask. It's not like you're taking Eliza and spiking with that. Getting a tempo off of a Foe Reaper or a Gas Coiler or whatever it might be. You're just taking a vanilla 7/6 for 2 turns. Now, I mean, Shudderwalk exists in the game, and Shudderwalk is busted and can take 6 stars reliably on turn 6. This is going to be a really good Shudderwalk unit. Digging with Eudora and getting this has funny thoughts because you get all the digs, all the golden things. There are a lot of funny uses for this. I think it's going to be situationally good. You have to be playing a hero that can get really early access to 6 stars to make this useful. Otherwise, it's going to be a card that is a way to lock down a lobby if you're already ahead. Then you can leverage the fact that you're ahead to take extra value, which is okay. Not an amazing card, not the end of the world. All right, quickly going through the rest. Like I said, 45 minutes, kick W. Elementals. Smogger is replacing Arcane Assistant. Instead of buffing all minions, all elementals 1/1, this is now buffing one specific elemental by whatever your tavern tier is. It's basically Rakanishu on a stick. Rakanishu hero power costs 2 to target something and give you tavern tier stats to a minion. This costs 3 and sells back for 1 and does the exact same effect. Interesting. It has to be used on elementals. So, can be very good tempo in the mid game if you have a Divine Shield elemental. Overall, it's a buff. It's better than Arcane Assistant was, so that's pretty cool. Dazzling Light Spawn is nuts. This is basically Nomi on Tavern 4. It also has the ramification that you don't have to play elementals to transition to elementals. We've had a lot of conversations in the last 24 hours about this card. I think this fits a lot of mid-game builds. Things like token demons that power spike really hard but never have a late game can take a dazzling light spawn and put it on the board. You're going to suicide like 6 to 8 minions before this thing dies every turn, and you basically take Nomi tier scaling for your elementals on the board. Then you full swap out of this, whatever comp this is sitting on the board with, into elementals. It's a way to get into Nomi without having to play Nomi and play bad elementals, which is kind of cool. I think it's going to be pretty strong if used right. Recycling Wraith is like the greatest card in the world for Millhouse. After you play an elemental, your next refresh costs 0. In other words, this thing's going to occupy a permanent spot on Millhouse's board, and every time you find like a elemental, for example, or Tavern Tempest, you're going to get 4 free gold. Because Selly buy for 2 gold, sell back for 2 gold. You play one, you roll, get the free roll, then play the other one, get the free roll, and roll again. It's 4 net gold every time you see a elemental. This thing is incredibly strong for Millhouse. For Nomi boards, it fits reasonably well. For everything else, it seems a little bit meh, because 1 gold refresh cost saved for a 5/4 body on 4 is just not that great. Situationally good. Interesting card. Master of Realities is replacing Gar. After a friendly elemental gains stats, gain 1/1. You can see the kind of synergy they're going for here. Party Elemental, Molten Rock, Majordomo, Little Rag. Whenever those things buff other elementals, Master of Realities also gets buffed. That's kind of cool. I think this thing really fits Domo boards, but it doesn't really fit much else. It's going to remove the incentive to go to 6 very heavily and play like Little Rag, Genie, Gar boards, because Gar's gone now. You don't stabilize that as quickly. And Master of Realities is not as reliable as Gar was before. Getting 6 health per minion played or 7 health per minion played, depending if you have Brand on the board, as an elemental board was a lot faster scaling than this 1/1 per elemental gaining a stat. Like, sure, it can scale with party elementals pretty quickly. It kind of fits Arana boards if you somehow got a hold of a 6-star. Tavern prizes are gone. I forgot to mention that at the beginning of the game, but if Arana was late game and was able to discover like a Tavern 6 minion, this thing's really, really nice. That's gone now, though. Plus, it's a minion that will never have Divine Shield, and it's a taunt. So it's very spore bait. It's very like Sephin bait. It's fine. It's an interesting card. Gar was too strong in its form. Gar blew out a lot of lobbies. This thing is more balanced. All right, last but not least, Quillboars as a tribe. Gem Splitter is the only minion that changed. This replaced Thorncaller. Thorncaller was a very strong card. Gem Splitter is busted, though. This card, after a friendly minion loses Divine Shield, gain a Blood Gem. Hello, George. Oh, George gets 7 Blood Gems a turn just from having 1 Gem Splitter? Cool, yeah, it seems balanced. Yep, that's okay. I don't know, what boards have a bunch of Divine Shields? How about Ground Shaker boards? You just put 6 Divine Shields on the board with Ground Shaker, or 5 in the Gem Splitter, and you get 5 Divine Shields pop per game, reliably. Army of the Empire boards, whatever it might be that have Divine Shields, and you get more Blood Gems. Those Blood Gems then make your Ground Shaker reliable for the next turn. This is incredibly good. Honestly, George may be the best hero in the game after this patch, and that's even saying Shutterwalk and Daryl being as busted as they are right now. George just got all the tools, all the ways of playing the game. That and the Mech, the 4-star Mech, that combined are just crazy for George. All right. Yeah, like I said, the newer tribes, they didn't get as many changes. Honestly, they were in a better place than the older tribes, so they did an overhaul and they focused on the old stuff, and that's good. Like, Demons got a major overhaul. I wish Murlocs got more love. Neutrals. There are 2 total neutrals, and that's it for this review. Budding Green Thumb. Avenge 3 on Tavern 3 is a little minion, 1/4 body. Give adjacent minions +2/1 permanently, if you have a good board for this. Boards say, for example, having Acolyte. Tavern 1, 2/2 taunt that reborns another taunt. You're going to reliably buff at least once to each side of this unit per turn, which means you're getting 4/2 scaling off a Tavern 2 unit. That's crazy good. If you make a decent board after that point and lean into the Green Thumb, you can probably get 2 procs off of this on average per turn. 8/4 a turn off a 3-star is insanely strong. This thing will see play. It's a nuanced card. It's going to take some level of building for it to work, which is good. But it's a little bit, I honestly think it's a little bit too strong. That dog is just very loud. Very, very loud. See, you even woke up M. Look at her back there. Trying to sleep in the corner. Witchwing Nest Matron, tier 4, avenge 3. Another minion to generate value every single time that minions die on your board. 3 minions die, add a Battlecry minion to your hand. This is a super strong effect. We already talked about how the demon one is going to give you a ton of economy. This one is at least on Tavern 4, which means economy later in the game is not as scary as economy as early in the game as Tavern 3. But the average quality of the minion will be much higher. Honestly, this minion fits on everyone's board. Just everyone's board. If you have minions on the board in the mid-game, nodders, we all do. You're going to have at least 3 things die before this, as long as you position reasonably well. That means you get a Battlecry minion per turn. Worst case scenario, the Battlecry sucks, and you get 1 gold. Best case scenario, it's useful. Best case scenario, it's a triple. Like, adding minions to your hand is way better than adding a gold coin. And on top of that, it's a Battlecry minion, which is a good minion for a lot of boards. Only change, only nerf in the entire set was Arm of the Empire 8 nerf, and I feel like this is just a meme, because this was not the problem with Arm of the Empire. Sure, it's a good change. I'd like a different change. I'd like Arm to be reduced in terms of the attack it gives taunts. But at least it got reduced in power a little bit for the tempo in the mid-game. Does make it a little more reasonable. Oh well. 4/4 isn't doing much. Bombs kill it? Incoming bomb meta. Kill the arms. All right, everyone. That's gonna wrap it up for the patch review. Like I said before, there's a ton to unpack in this patch. We did an exhaustive review yesterday, and I mean like 10 hours worth of time, 7 of it on stream, on my stream, and then like 3 on Pocky's stream. And the VOD itself is linked below in the comments if you do want to see like any more discussion on the patch. But we'll be live here in soon, which is what, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on twitch.tv. Link again below in the comments. And hope to see you guys around. All right, take care, have a great day, and peace.